record on this. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Inga Houston. I'm President CEO of the Dublin Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for showing up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on this lovely Thursday morning. I'd like to welcome everybody and introduce our presentation or presenter today. His name is David Stark. He's Chief Public Affairs and Communications Officer for the BayEast Association of Realtors. He is the managing the association's communications and public relations, political activities, and works with elected leaders and governmental staff in the development of housing policy. Prior to joining the BayEast staff, David worked in municipal government for more than 12 years, managing a variety of housing and community development programs. David has a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science and English from the University of California, Riverside, and a master's degree in city planning and regional planning from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. His specialties are housing programs and policy development, public policy analysis, residential real estate market analysis, which is what we're going to hear today, political organizing, public speaking, communication strategies, professional coaching, bass guitar, and vintage motorcycle restoration and racing. I think that's your passion, isn't it?
Wait, that's on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Oh shit, I gotta update that. Oh, sorry.
Okay, what was incorrect, or what do we need to add?
No, I didn't realize that was on my profile on LinkedIn. That's kind of,
That's really cool.
You wrote it.
Band? Very cool.
Yeah, I'm in a really cool band called No Star Motel. As a matter of fact, we just released our first album. It's on Spotify. It's on a bunch of the hosting platforms, and we got a bunch of videos on YouTube. If you look for No Star Motel.
Look at guy got his phone out and he's looking at Spotify right now.
Inga, can before I jump in, can we do, since there's 9 of us, can we do introductions? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I think everybody except people that I don't know. So, can you call out names, or do you want me to call out names?
Let's start with Sue Stevenson.
Hello, I'm the chair of the chamber this year, newly retired from DSRSD, and now I'm working on writing and doing some consulting. Got a couple people asking me, so why not?
Danita.
I'm Danita Romero, Fiscal Agent and Economic Development Manager for Chabot Las Positas Community College District. We have an economic development department that we work all over the state of California for people. So, and I'm a director with the Dublin Chamber of Commerce.
Guy Houston.
Guy Houston, wearer of many hats, but today I'm here at Valley Capital Realty and a proud member of BayEast.
Hey, can you sell me a house? Oh, that's right, you already did.
Brian
Gentry, Fremont Bank. I'm here in the Tri-Valley, and I do private banking with a lot of clients for pretty much everything they need.
Miss Patty Pringle.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Patty Pringle. I'm an enrolled agent, East Bay Tax Matters, and my office is in Dublin.
Welcome. We have 2 more. Rhonda Franklin.
I'm here. Good morning, Rhonda Franklin with the City of Dublin Office of Economic Development. Happy to be here this morning.
Awesome. And then Steve Lehman.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's been quite a while. Past chairman of the Dublin Chamber of Commerce, and my son and I own the Lehman Insurance Agency in Dublin. And it's been a long time. You look good, David. He didn't look any different, except, like you said, maybe he got rid of the beard, but yeah. Good to see you.
It's good to virtually see y'all as well. I miss y'all. This presentation is one of my favorite of the whole year, and it just brings back some good memories of being in City Hall and hanging out and hearing also what you would report on as well. So yeah. And Danita, thank you to Las Positas for teaching me how to weld about 20 years ago. So
oh, good.
Still use those welding skills. Okay, let's get to it. Small groups. So what I'll do is I've got a whole bunch of slides like I normally do, but I'll stop as we go through this and ask questions if that's okay with everybody, or y'all can ask questions and share. And I wasn't joking. The working from home in a house that Guy sold us 20 plus years ago. So yeah, we're still here. So thanks, Guy.
Happy.
Yeah, I joked that there was a 15-minute period in the spring of 2021 when we could afford home ownership, and Guy was right there, and we made it happen. So I'd like to just tell a quick story using a bunch of slides. Actually, not a quick story. I'm going to tell you a story about what happened in residential real estate last year. That's probably going to be a little surprising, considering everything that has gone on since COVID kicked in. And COVID, in many respects, has put a definite thumbprint on the homeownership experience. Sorry, send that to voicemail. Throughout the, okay, can you guys see my slides? Are they still up?
Yes.
Yeah.
My phone just rang, and it rings through my computer, blah, blah, blah. What I was saying is that COVID has absolutely impacted residential real estate in the East Bay in particular for a few reasons. And I can't remember, when was the last time has it been a couple of years?
No, you were here last year.
Was I? Okay. All right. Well, here's an update from last year. Sorry, just, time is just such a weird thing. Really, there's three major plot points in what happened last year. And the most obvious would be there's just very few choices for home buyers. We're at a 6-year low in terms of choices throughout the East Bay. And I am going to start with some observations about the East Bay and then get very, very specific about Dublin, Pleasanton, and Livermore at the end of the presentation. Next non-surprising plot point would be record-setting sales prices. And when I say record-setting, significant increases from 2020, and we're at price points that we've never experienced ever. And then the last plot point, which may be a little bit surprising, is that these conditions that I'm going to talk about are sustainable. And when I say that they're sustainable, that they're working, that's based on the fact that our sales activity was actually at a 6-year high last year, which may seem a little bit ironic because I just said that choices for buyers was at a 6-year low. And we'll talk about that cognitive dissonance and why it's actually true in a second. The pace of sales is at a 4-year low. So while buyers had limited choices and they were paying extremely high prices, they weren't waiting. They were getting in, they were making offers, and sellers were accepting those offers very quickly, which tells us that sellers weren't holding off and trying to get even more money. They were accepting the offers as they came in, which again says that these conditions are sustainable. And last, pending sales, which is a measure that we use to determine buyer enthusiasm. And it's another one of these leading indicators to see what may be happening coming down the pike. Buyers stayed in the market throughout 2021, even as we were setting sales price records. Now you'll see, because I'm going to show some things on a month-to-month basis, that sales drop off during the year, pending sales drop off. But you'll notice that they drop off because of the season, not necessarily because of sales prices. So we'll dig into this first point about choices for home buyers. The way I like to set this up is do an aggregation of the single family detached homes, so no condos, no townhomes, that were listed in the multiple listing service in the East Bay on a month-to-month basis going all the way back to 2017. And there's a few notable things that are happening here. The first notable thing is what occurred in 2019, because for several months in 2019, we saw a very significant increase in choices available for home buyers, and that resonated in terms of price stability during 2019, longer days on market, more negotiation between buyers and sellers, and a more balanced market. That balanced market existed for about a minute, because as we moved into 2020, we were fully expecting these balanced conditions to continue, and they didn't, because you can see this little dip in inventory early in the year. That corresponds with the COVID-19 shutdown, the fact that real estate activities were not deemed essential for several weeks. So all real estate activities really took a major pause until they were deemed essential, and until agents were able to figure out how to do real estate safely. And when they did, there was a rebound in homes listed for sale. There was this second, what I call bump in inventory much later in the year. We start 2021, very limited inventory for the first 3 quarters. We didn't really see more homes coming on the market in East Bay until much, much later in the year, months later than we would see in a normal year. And I share this month-to-month trend thing just to illustrate how COVID-19 has really, it hasn't erased the seasonal nature of real estate. It's just shifted when things happen during the year. And in 2021, things happen much later. So when we take a look at this without the seasonal variations, when we average out the number of homes that were listed for sale on a monthly basis, you can see that 2019, 2,500 units on average available for sale. In the East Bay, that drops to 1,400 units in 2020 and then 1,100 units in 2021. And I share this perspective because it takes out the kind of that seasonal noise, and you can see clearly that there was a very different world in 2020 and a very different world in 2021 for home buyers. This shows up in record-breaking sales prices. This is an aggregation of the median sales price for single-family detached homes in the East Bay, and I'll start with 2018 to 2019, where for the first time in almost a decade, we saw prices stabilize. $844,000 is still a lot of money for a home, but understand this is the median, so half those prices were above $844,000, half were below. We get into 2020, and with all the crazy things that happened last year, there was still a lot of confidence in homeownership. Interest rates were low, and we set some sales records in terms of prices. The price stability was out the window in 2020. We get to 2021 and a massive increase in sales prices in the East Bay. The median for Alameda, Contra Costa counties, north of 1.1 million. If you're wondering why, it's not just buyer greed or low interest rates. Here's the correlation. We're going to bring back the month-to-month inventory, and you can see as inventory trends down, sales prices trend up. And what's also remarkable is going back to 2019, we see these several months of price stability, direct correlation with the increase in choices that were available for buyers. They were negotiating and they were able to keep prices stable. Now this big statement about markets are working, and this very controversial comment, maybe it's not so controversial, maybe I'm adding some drama to the presentation. Home sales at a 6-year high. How is this possible? Well, it's possible because, and this was something very surprising. You kind of get caught up in the weeds of lack of inventory, high prices. And sometimes I miss the fact that, year to year, going back to 2016, sales activity was pretty stable in the East Bay. So to say that we were at a 6-year high, that implies that there's been a lot of changes year to year. Well, there haven't been a lot of changes year to year. There's, we're within this 19 to 20,000 unit range, and that's for the entire East Bay. So that's a pretty big sample size, and to have such small standard deviation, it just shows us that home sales are actually pretty stable year to year until we get to 2020. We see things drop into the 19,000 range, and then something obviously very different happened in 2021. One of the things that happened in 2021 would go back to buyers being priced out of the market in 16, 17, 18, and 19. You get to 2020, people are staying home, they're not going on vacation, they're not buying things, they're not going out to dinner, but they're still employed and they're saving their money. And they're starting to assess their choices about, well, my job is here, I live here, I don't have to worry about a commute. I got all this money in the bank, maybe we should buy something. And we don't know if we've got kids, if they're going to be in school or not. We don't know if we're going to be able to vacation. So maybe we should buy something that's got a bunch of bedrooms and maybe a yard to do a staycation in. So while they were thinking about this during 2020 and saving their money, when 2021 comes along, what they do, they took that money they've been saving, they leveraged low interest rates, and they bought houses. So that's sort of a macro explanation. A more micro explanation would be to look at the difference in sales activity on a month-to-month basis comparing 20 to 21. We started the year in 2020 with about 900 units sold. at the peak, and you can see this massive increase in sales activity from May to June. This is because agents were able to conduct real estate activities again. They figured out how to work within the rules. Buyers were waiting. Peak sales activity occurred in June and July, about 2,000 units sold. We get to 2021, and we started the year at a much faster pace. There were 1,200 units sold in January versus the 900 units sold. And the peak that occurred in midsummer was 2,400 units. So the volume was just more significant, not only at the beginning of the year, but throughout the year as well. So if you're, again, trying to equate, wait, you said 6 years lowest inventory, 6-year high. The other issue there is there's not necessarily a direct correlation between the numbers I'm reporting in terms of inventory for sale and actual sales. There's some amount of churning that happens in real estate where a home will come on the market, then go off the market, then come back on the market. There's also a little bit of a snapshot effect. When we pull these numbers, we're doing that a few days after the preceding month, and sometimes the inventory numbers may not completely capture every single home that may have been on the market during that preceding month. So there isn't a direct correlation. However, the trends are clear. I can tell you unequivocally, there has been a decrease in inventory for the last several years, at the same time an increase in sales activity. That's sort of an academic argument debate that we can have about this lack of correlation between inventory and supply. I think a bigger issue, though, is this assertion, not assertion, assertion. I went to school, that markets are working. Here's one evidence that markets are working. We're going to superimpose the month-to-month price changes with sales activity. And you can see that sales, they do drop every year. Sales drop every holiday season. What's remarkable, though, is we get into 2021, we see these record-breaking sales prices in the spring and summer, and we take a look at sales activity, and sales don't start to drop until we get into the holiday season. So it wasn't that buyers were saying, I can't pay these prices. It's just they were approaching the holidays. They didn't want to buy. There's this direct correlation with the holiday season. So this is the fact that sales prices and sales activity didn't correlate in terms of departing, tells me that these buyers were willing to pay. The other evidence for this is how long a home was on the market. We're going to take a look going back to 2018, and this is, again, indication of the seasonal nature of real estate. We see a spike in how long a home is on the market, 45 days in this case, during the holiday season in 19. We see another spike, homes sitting on the market for 45 days. Again, when is this? December, January, February. So things slow down during the holiday season. The spike as we led into 2021 was very different. It did occur. Things did slow down December, January, and February, but it was only 25 days. We have never seen a January where a home was on the market for only 25 days. The big takeaway here is that, as I mentioned earlier, the seasonal nature of real estate, it's changing. Things are slowing down during the holidays, but they're not slowing down that much. It also indicates that buyers are getting in the market when they want to get in the market. They're not waiting. They understand that there are few choices, and if the time to buy is January, that's exactly what they're doing. They're getting in, they're making competitive offers, and sellers, on the other hand, they're not necessarily waiting for the spring for more money. An offer comes in, boom, they're selling. So this is more evidence that these markets are working. If we were to see days on market increasing to the 30, 40, 50-day period, that would tell me that buyers aren't making competitive offers, sellers are taking longer to accept offers. That's evidence that we would expect prices to change, but that's not happening. Another way to look at this is in 2019, when we did see more inventory, we did see prices stabilize. Average days on the market was 32. We get into 2021 where we've got this record-setting sales prices and we're in the high teens. So unless and until this number starts to increase, I wouldn't anticipate a big change in sales prices. The media doesn't necessarily report on days on market, but as someone that looks at these things all the time, this is the canary in the coal mine. This number right here, how long a home is on the market, is a true indicator as to whether sales prices are sustainable. And as far as I'm concerned, until this number starts to inch up, the prices that we're seeing today are absolutely sustainable. Before we get into the Dublin, Pleasant, and Livermore markets, just one more observation, a measure of pending sales. We're just going to look at 2 years. You can see that pending sales dropped between February and March of 2020. Why? The shutdown. People literally couldn't get into open houses. They couldn't see properties. There were some homes that were being purchased sight unseen, but yeah, massive drop off. Particularly, this is when we would normally see pending sales increase as we get into spring. Exactly the opposite happened. They did rebound as we get into May. Peak pending activity didn't happen until October, with about 2,200 pending sales made. We take a look at the same period in 2021, February, 1,900 pending sales, 2,000 pending sales in April, 1,900 in May. Very, very different experience than what we experienced in early spring in 2020. And if you superimpose over this, I think I'd do it, there's sales prices. You can see that as we were setting records, yeah, there's a little bit of a drop off in pending sales, but the real drop off happened in 2020 during the holiday season, October, November, December. And then it happened again, October, November, December. It wasn't because sales prices were in the 1.2 range. It's because we were getting into the holiday season. I am now going to take a pause. I'm going to turn the slideshow off. I've got some delicious coffee here. Questions, comments before we get into specific markets. Danita, go for it.
I'm taking screenshots so that I can flip back and forth.
Okay, and I'll send you these slides too if you want.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Could you explain to me the correlation between average number of homes for sale per month, and homes sold in the East Bay?
So in that, what I did on that average, so short answer, there isn't a direct correlation. I did that slide on average number of homes sold per year to take the seasonal fluctuations out, so it was easier to see that, yeah, we had a lot more inventory in 2019 compared to 2020, and we had a lot less inventory in 2021 compared to the previous years. One analogy that the chief economist from the California Association of Realtors shared with me is, you take a look at the total number of loaves of bread that a supermarket sells in a month, and that's a pretty easy thing to figure out. You look at the previous month's sales. You walk into a supermarket on any given day, though, and they may only have a limited number of loaves of bread on the shelf. So when we're taking these data snapshots, taking a snapshot of the MLS, sometimes it doesn't completely reflect the total number of homes that may be available during a given period. And it's a frustrating thing. It's a market parameter that I've struggled with for a long time, because I figure, there's got to be a one-to-one correlation. Well, there isn't necessarily that one-to-one correlation. So I have to, existentially make this split between, when you're looking at trend information vis-a-vis inventory, that's going to be a separate conversation with separate stats versus the sales activity conversation. And the way I look at it is that the inventory trends direct influence on sales prices. The sales activity trends direct impact on where prices may be going. And if we see, as with days on market, if we see a major shift in sales activity, you're an economist, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Is that, if people ask me to predict what's going to happen, I say, look at days on market, look at sales activity, and take the seasonal nature out of it as well. So
Got it.
I don't know if I answered your question, or if I just babbled for 2 minutes.
Well, no, you did, because when I look at the homes sold in the East Bay and I divide that by 12, I'm going to assume that I know my average. But then when I look back at your average number of sales per month, they don't correlate.
Yeah.
So that answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can, I have other reports specific, lots of number stuff. If you want number stuff, hit me afterwards, and I can give you raw numbers as well.
I love numbers.
Well, then I'm here for you. Cool.
There you go.
Okay, back to the slideshow. So we've done a bunch of stuff on an aggregation of the East Bay. Let's get super local here with our 3 communities in the Tri-Valley. And we're going to start with inventory. So Danita, here you are.
Wow.
3 lines here, purple Livermore, don't know why I chose that number. You all know why I chose that number. It's like a wine number. Green, Dublin, obviously. Why is the Dublin line so much lower? It's because it's a smaller market, and that's why. Regardless, though, look at the trend. Increase in inventory, 19. Big drop in 20. Another big drop in 2021, and it's seasonal as well. And Danita, before you ask, does this include new construction as well? If the home builder is putting their home on the multiple listing service, yes, it does. If they're selling direct to a buyer, no, it doesn't. However, in talking to other housing economists over the years about potential mismatch of MLS data versus actual transactions, most housing economists agree that there's enough transactions that are hitting the MLS for it to be a statistically valid sample. So, and this is something that I was asking when I first started doing this analysis many years ago. So is it, particularly in Dublin with all the new construction, are we going to miss some transactions? Yeah, but the trend is pretty clear. Another statistic, and I think I reported on this a couple of years ago when I was with you, is the California Association of Realtors does a survey of home buyers and sellers every year. And one of the things that they track is how long a homeowner is in their home before they sell. Now, the conventional wisdom in residential real estate for years was it's 7 years. Homeowner does something every 7 years. Well, 6-7 years ago, that started to change. And that 7 years went to 9, it went to 11, it went to 14. And I mention this because with all the new residential construction that's happened in Dublin, what impact is that having on the market? And the stuff that's happened just in the last 10 years, I don't anticipate that we're going to see that stuff coming on the market for a while. So any concerns about, all this residential development is going to depress the market, it's going to flood with inventory? Yeah, no. Particularly when you think about the product that's been built in Dublin in the last decade. It's new, it's nice, it's close to great amenities. Dublin has become a destination community in and of itself. It's not a starter community where you're getting your foot in for home ownership and then you'll find some nicer place to live. People are buying here because they want to live here. They're buying nice houses in a nice community. There, I said it. We take a look at.
Quote you on that?
What's that?
Can we quote you on that?
Hey, this is on, you're recording it, so I clicked yes, so do with it what you will. Another way to take a look at inventory, here's our I'm sorry, this is a snapshot comparing January to January. So this is hot off the presses. Rotary Club didn't get this.
Wow.
You had 11 homes on the market in Dublin last January. You got 7. So already it's not a slower year, and I'm going to explain that in a second, but from a volume perspective, it's already a very different year. Similar in Livermore, not as much, just a few unit difference, major difference in Pleasanton. San Ramon, it's different. Real estate's local. They actually gained a couple units. But we're not starting with that head start that we had in 2021 versus 2020. So it's already a different year. That said, it's January. It's the slowest month of the year for real estate. I shouldn't say slow. It's a unique month of the year. And I'm not going to say slow because we're going to get to that in a second. Here are median sales prices, specifically in the Tri-Valley. Everybody's north of $1 million. Dublin's at 1.4. Part of that's driven by the new construction. Part of it is just, this is a great place to live. It really is. It really is. And those of you that are just like, your minds are exploding right now, 1.4, you built a nice town. Congratulations. This was an aggregation of 2021. Here's where we are in January, and you're at 1.6 as of January, but keep in mind that's based on just a handful of transactions. It's not the entire year, but it's $400,000 above where you were last January. Just saying. San Ramon in the 2 range. There are multiple Tri-Valley communities in the 2 range. And I think Alamo's in the 3 range for January. So we take a look at our sales activity comparing 20 to 21. And yeah, it's only 31 units more than 2020, but it's more homes sold as you were setting records with your sales prices. So I'm going to stick by this theory that these market conditions are sustainable. Livermore, even more dramatic, Pleasanton dramatic as well. People are willing to pay. They want the Tri-Valley. And part of it is, this is where the homes are that have the bedrooms, that have the bathrooms, that have the yards for a staycation. And this is just, you know, if you got a staycation anywhere, Tri-Valley's pretty damn nice. Sorry about the language. Let me rephrase that. That was rude. The Tri-Valley's pretty damn nice. So there. Here's our sales activity snapshot. It mirrors inventory almost in terms of a trend. But here, again, you can see the disconnect between homes on the market and homes sold. Some of these clearly were on the market in December, but we're down. We're down by 10 plus in Dublin, down a bit in Livermore, way down in Pleasanton. It mirrors their trend for inventory. San Ramon down less than 10 as well. But as with inventory, it's a different year. We're starting at a different level. But it's not a slow year. And here's why I don't want to say that we're starting off more slowly, because we're not. 6 days on market in January. This is just mind blowing. January, it's typically, it's going to, I mean, I don't know if Guy dropped off the call yet. You know, things are typically on for more than a month. 6 days in January. This is the one that I'm looking at when I describe this as being a very hot year for real estate. May not be a hot year for volume, but it's going to be a hot year for prices, and it's going to be a hot year for just the pace of sales. Here's our pendings. A little drop, down by 6 compared to January. Even in Livermore, down a bit in Pleasanton, down a bit in San Ramon, driven by inventory, not by prices. There are still people out there in the market. And this is January. Come see me in a couple months, and particularly the days on market. It could be hours on market. What's going to happen? So Jordan Levine is Chief Economist for the California Association of Realtors. We chatted a few weeks ago. I wanted to confirm some of my observations, and here's what he says. This is, you know, he's statewide, but he also takes a look at regional markets as well. Yeah. New construction, it's great, but there's still massive demand. New construction is not going to depress or really fundamentally change these market dynamics. There's going to be fewer choices for the buyers, but they're still going to be in the market. Interest rates are going to be going up, but they're still, depending on your perspective, going to be relatively low. It will kick some buyers out of the market, but the key word here is some buyers. It's not going to drive all buyers out of the market, because there's still people making good money. I mean, the thing that we talk about, these low interest rates, when you're discussing an $800,000 or $900,000 mortgage, even an incremental change in interest rates, that's going to have a big effect on your monthly payment. But it's a lot of people making good money in this area, and even if those monthly payments were to go up, they're still going to be out there looking for homes. He sees record-setting prices in 2022. He sees the economy, you know, it's just some reports issued. Well, there was the inflation report that was just issued, I think, this morning. But at the same time, you know, GDP and jobs, things are rocking and rolling, particularly in the San Francisco Bay Area. And he anticipates that we're going to have another year of strong sales. Buyers are going to have to get in quick, but he anticipates, and this is that last one that really says, okay, are these conditions sustainable? When the chief economist from CAR says we're going to set some records in terms of sales activity, that means everything above it still sustainable, particularly the prices. That's my name. That's what they call me. That's where you email me. That's where you call me. Appreciate the hospitality. I don't know if we got time for questions, but I got half a cup of coffee. So what do you got?
I was pre-sent some questions, and he's on the call. Do you want me to ask them, or would you like to ask them yourself?
Well, I mean, if he's got the guts to ask me a question.
Well, it was all written down. You can just read it to him now.
Okay. Well, there were two
Steve, you've
questions.
got plenty of guts. I'm just funning you.
Okay. The first question is, the NIMBY theme continues to be an issue in our Bay Area cities, and more so recently with SB 9 enforcement. And SB 9, if you'll recall, is for the accessory dwelling unit legislation. Affordable housing in California has been a challenge for decades, and he was wondering how history will look back on this period.
With much interest. And to be clear, I mean, yeah, SB9 does have something to do with ADUs, but of greater interest is the ability to split your lot, which is a bit more than just an ADU.
Actually, can't you split your house now?
Well, the lot split is the bigger one, because that really can fundamentally change what you can do in terms of footprint and floor area ratio and things like that. But we're getting into the weeds. CAR claims that only about 5% of parcels in California will be eligible to do a lot split. So there's a lot of concern about. So to answer your question about history, I think historians will look back and say that, yeah, the media did a lot of stuff about SB9, that they did a lot of stuff about ADUs, but in reality, because of the economics of construction during this period, some things happened, but it didn't fundamentally change neighborhoods. Unless and until building materials and the entitlement process changes, the neighborhoods that we see today, yeah, there's going to be a few more second-story additions. There's going to be some ADUs popped into backyards, but it is so expensive to do that stuff and complicated for many homeowners that we need to see a fundamental change in the ability to build stuff before we see SB9 or any other legislation really changing the nature of neighborhoods. History may also look back at this point and see the impact that lawsuits and litigation is having and will have on land use decisions. I mean, you've already seen it. You had a front row seat to see what happened in Pleasanton. The high density, much needed rental housing that was built adjacent to BART was a direct result of litigation. Those were land use decisions made by a court. And I'm sensing that there are other interested parties that will be taking a look at aggressive tenant protection policies and maybe litigating around that in terms of, class action and government takings, because that seems to be the only lever that works these days. The affordable housing crisis is a human-caused disaster, and I don't mean to be insensitive to individuals that have lost their home because of natural disasters, but the jobs housing imbalance, the lack of workforce housing, or however you want to describe it, was not caused by an act of God. It was caused by people like you and I. And unless and until we become more comfortable living a little closer to each other, that lack of affordable housing, the jobs housing imbalance, will continue. And as long as we continue seeking representation by people that don't want to plan for housing, this situation is going to continue. And as long as that situation continues, the litigation environment is going to be ripe for interested parties that see litigation as a way. I mean, this whole thing about, what is it, Bobcats in Mountain View or wherever it was, or someone in Atherton, we're exempt from SB9 because we're a cougar sanctuary. Come on. Seriously? I mean, that's a glib example, but I can see any kind of roadblocks that are put up that are preventing either ADUs or non-compliance with housing elements. And SB9, I think, is just the first example of, we're losing local control. Well, what did local control get us? It got us a housing crisis.
I have a question, David. What are your thoughts about the tiny house solution there in Oakland for the homeless? There's this whole encampment near, if you ride the BART connector to the airport, you can see the little tiny house encampment. What are your thoughts?
I think it makes good press. I think it's frankly, it's a Band-Aid, and it's probably not a long-term sustainable solution to the homelessness crisis. There are much more difficult to solve issues related to substance abuse and mental health that need to be addressed. I mean, for those individuals that are able for those individuals that find those tiny houses to be a sustainable and safe form of shelter, that's great. But in terms of it making a real dent in the homelessness crisis, no, we need to, as a society, we need to commit to solutions that are going to address the causes versus a highly visible solution that's really only helping a few people.
I have a question.
Go.
So community college districts all up and down the state of California, they're redoing the amount of money that we get based on a student formula. And part of the problem that we have here in this area is the value of homes and the cost of living here are much higher than, say, somebody in Bakersfield. So one of my questions would be, and it may not even impact this, but by having these homes sold at a higher level, I would see the tax basis as being much higher. And I'm curious to know if you've heard or you have a feel for what part of value that's giving to the tax basis for education. Maybe Rhonda's the right answer for this, but in our area, do you have any feel for that at all?
Well, this is a tough issue because, yeah, we're setting records in terms of sales prices. But if you take a look at sales volume, so when I said that we set a 6-year record in terms of sales activity, that was an aggregation for the East Bay. If you're speaking directly about revenue sources that are impacting your community college district, then you've got to look locally and see the sales activity locally.
Mm-hmm.
There was an incremental increase in sales in Dublin. There's a much more dramatic increase in Livermore and Pleasanton. But is it enough to? And I'm not super familiar with your budget and your revenue streams going back a decade. Or how I'd have to do some homework to determine how much is going to your community college district.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I haven't answered your question at all.
No. No, I hear what you're saying. I'm curious, maybe Rhonda may have the answer. Rhonda, do you know or have you heard anything about the tax basis for buying a home $400,000 more year over year? How that's going to impact the revenue for the city, or is it just such a small portion because of the volume?
Yeah, and I would have to defer to our finance team to answer that question. I can definitely get you the answer to that. I would just need to talk to our finance department as they closely monitor those numbers more so than I would. So I can definitely get you the answer to that. I just need to check in with our finance department.
I'd be curious to know the answer to that. Obviously, we are based on taxpayer dollars, so
Mm-hmm.
it always. I mean, I think that buying a house averaged at $1.6 million in Dublin is huge compared to when we moved here 30 years ago. But in some ways, it might impact us positively here as a business. So I'm curious to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I will get some information and follow up with you.
Thank you.
Danita, you might want to pop your email into the chat so Rhonda can capture it.
Sounds great.
Anybody else have questions? Because I have another question that had been emailed to me.
Go for it.
Okay, I'll go for it. Okay, Pleasanton, and you kind of alluded to this one with the Bobcats or the Mountain Lions. Pleasanton fought growth years ago and lost. Some Livermore residents have been vocal about the Eden Housing Building, a 4-story unit in downtown Livermore. Woodside even tried to stop it by claiming it was intruding on mountain lion population, and Dublin has been criticized by surrounding communities for its housing expansion in the last decade, or more in its efforts to build more affordable housing, because Dublin's led the way here in our Tri-Valley. How do you see the direction that our legislation and government have taken in California to encourage and enforce affordable housing growth?
Yeah, and I think I probably over-answered the other question and touched on this one. The challenge to the Eden Project EIR was tossed out recently.
Yesterday.
We saw what happened with the Woodside Cougar Sanctuary. There's some effort to repeal some portions of SB 9 It's being led actually by some city council members in the Tri-Valley. But ultimately, I think, we're going to see, it takes a lot for a ballot initiative to get qualified. And if it does get on the ballot, that's going to be your ultimate poll to see just how strong NIMBYs are statewide. Given what happened with the judge's ruling in the Eden case, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, litigation around non-compliance with California housing policy will be ultimately successful. The bigger issue, I think NIMBYs are one thing, but CEQA is the other big issue. The environmental laws, the laws that ostensibly are here to protect our environment, have been an extremely effective tool to either extract payments or to just ultimately stop residential development. That's the other big one that needs to change, because CEQA is not protecting the environment when it's used by interested parties to stop residential development. It's doing exactly the opposite. So,
isn't there AB 101001? Isn't that one kind of okay? The governor says build houses, and then you got CEQA that is trying to. I mean, it's like the same organization is fighting itself. And we're all going, does that make sense?
Well, we live in a market economy, and there are interested parties that have realized that there's profit to be gained in using CEQA to either stop a project or to essentially extort payments out of that project. It's just the nature of how our economy works. Is that ironic? Absolutely. Is it functional for an entire industry that makes its living off of CEQA lawsuits? Absolutely. So it's just one of those things that's unique to California.
It leaves us all confused because we're supposed to build houses and plan for them, and then you get roadblocked.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, sometimes leading a healthy lifestyle is a challenge, because you got to watch what you eat, you got to exercise. Exercise is sometimes uncomfortable. It makes you sweat, it makes you hurt. But if you want to be healthy and live for a long time, you got to do that. And what we're experiencing with the current housing crisis is a society that doesn't want to eat right, that doesn't want to exercise. Many of us want to have exactly the same lifestyle that we experienced when we moved to whatever community 25 years ago. And we don't want to go through that pain and discomfort of seeing the skyline change a little bit, or having to share the road with a few more people, or just being a little bit closer to each other. That's the exercise and the discomfort that clearly, many voters don't want to do. And as a result, the overall health of the housing market is in question for those that can't afford, or having to commute long distances, or, as Sue mentioned, are living on the streets in Oakland. And unless and until we as a society are willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and make those changes in our diet and exercise vis-a-vis our daily lifestyle, in as much as these real estate market conditions are going to continue, these housing affordability issues are going to continue as well. So we can point at CEQA, we can point at whatever, but the problem is really with us. And I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer or Donnie Downer here. It's just the reality. We're electing people to represent us in terms of housing policies that have gotten us to this situation.
And we also grow more jobs, but not enough housing to go with those jobs.
Yep.
That needs to kind of go together.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing is this is a Chamber of Commerce group. Does anybody on this call really want to see a massive retrenchment in our local economies? Because this is a supply and demand issue. And if our supply is fixed, then the variable that you adjust to deal with housing affordability issues is on the demand side. How do you adjust that? Well, you could dial down demand for housing significantly by getting rid of a vibrant economy that employs millions of people in this region. I don't think we want that to happen.
Mhm.
So the solution is on the supply side.
You got to build houses, and a variety of them.
Yeah. And I mean, what's really ironic is that we do a lot of advocacy work on behalf of mom and pop landlords, small rental housing providers. And we're up against tenant advocates who are pounding at the doors of city halls in the East Bay when they really should be pounding at the halls of city halls in the peninsula and the South Bay, where they continue to add jobs, but because of mountain lions, don't add houses. So I'm sorry, that was glib, but it's also true.
Yeah, and they don't build on the hillsides, which I don't know. I grew up in Castro Valley, and there's lots of houses on hills.
Well, and I mean, we take, like, SB9 gets a lot of attention because it could change the character of single family neighborhoods. Yeah, it might. But I look at, land use patterns in the Tri-Valley, and there are a lot of single level overparked strip malls. I mean, one of my favorite Afghan restaurants on the planet happens to be in a single story overparked strip mall in Dublin. Love that place, if you know what I'm talking about. You got to be a real Dublin insider to know.
KP?
That's the one.
The best. Mango ice cream.
Oh.
Homemade.
Anyway, my point is, does it have, can we somehow preserve those businesses while at the same time doing a mixed use? Just saying. And if you extrapolate that across all the other underutilized strip malls in the Tri-Valley, now you're talking about moving the needle in terms of housing development. Are those strip malls going to look different? Yeah. Are they going to block a little bit of the sky? Absolutely. Is it going to potentially put more people in your community? Guess what? People are already in your community. They just happen to be sitting on 580, belching, idling on 580 and poisoning our environment. So.
Well, that brings a question to Rhonda. What is Dublin looking at for our strip malls? Because some of them are a little empty too.
Dublin is working on a downtown, we have a downtown specific plan, and staff is consistently working on finalizing what that downtown is going to be, what it's going to have, what it's going to look like. And I know that some of the plans that they're considering are mixed use projects. But all of that right now is in negotiations. And of course, it depends on the developer that decides to work on that and what they propose. So, and the cities, we work with the developers on their ideas and what we think it should look like. We of course give our ideas on what would best suit what would be best suited for the area. So the city is absolutely looking at things like that. It's just, in some cases, it takes a little bit of time to come to fruition because you're in talks with developers and negotiations and et cetera. So yeah, the city is definitely aware of that and the value on mixed use developments for this purpose.
Excellent. Well, is there any other questions for our real estate guru, David Stark?
I have a question. It's Rhonda. So
hi, Rhonda.
Hi. You said that you see this trend sustaining. This demand for housing and the prices more so sustained. Do you feel that at some point, or do you think that a corrective course will come about somehow? Like you said that if we increase the amount of housing on the market, perhaps that would decrease the price that these houses are going for. Did I hear that correct? Or do you think there will be some other corrective measure that happens? Or do you think that the way these prices continue to go up, that is a true value of what these homes are worth now?
So there are, I think, 3 or 4 questions in there. I'll try to answer all of them. As far as true value, yeah, I mean, if you're defining what people are willing to pay today as value, absolutely. Particularly when you look at days on market, they're willing to pay these prices and they're willing to pay them quickly. So are these prices depressed at all? Could they go up even more? Possibly, but when we're looking at, in the teens, that means that sellers are not sitting back waiting for prices to be driven up. They have multiple offers that are coming in well above the asking price. So do I believe these reflect a true value? Absolutely. They're a true value right now. Course of action, that question sort of implies, is there a policy or is there something proactive that could be done that would change market conditions? So interest rates are a really good example. And as I mentioned earlier, even a small increase in interest rates does change the payment for a large mortgage. I see that not bringing prices down. I see that bringing some price stability. One could argue that double-digit price appreciation year on year isn't sustainable. And guess what? It wasn't sustainable. We saw that for about a 6-year period until we got to 2019, where we did see all those conditions that I mentioned earlier. Days on market increased, partly also because we saw an increase in inventory. And what happened with prices? They stabilized. In a few communities, they dropped a little bit, but they didn't correct like we saw 2008 and 9 during the mortgage meltdown, when the entire home purchase financing structure collapsed under its own weight that wasn't sustainable to begin with. The other issues, and I have to bring them up, would be natural disaster. And this goes back to the demand side of the equation. Something conceivably could happen that would cause people to not want to have home ownership in the Tri-Valley. And that's harder to predict, but where we live in California with a combination of wildfires and earthquakes, that's something, me not acknowledging it is naive. But it's much easier to predict what impact interest rates could have on the market than a natural disaster. But those are some things that could cause it to change. Yeah, I mean, this is, and it seems like an oversimplification, but the Tri-Valley is a great place to live. I don't need to, I'm preaching to the choir. I mean, and unless and until we demolish 580 and 680 and get rid of BART, and the tech sector levitates away from the South Bay, and more importantly, and this is something that I think I shared with this group a few years ago, there would have to be a major shift in the philosophy of the San Francisco Bay Area that welcomes people from all over the planet, which isn't necessarily the case in other parts of the United States. There's a lot of dominoes that would have to fall to really change the desirability of homeownership, particularly in the Tri-Valley.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the big domino that fell in 2008 and 9 was the mortgage meltdown. And that's just not a domino I see falling, because the way that people financed home purchases during the last 10 years has been much more sustainable and on much more solid footing. So that one big variable, adjustable interest rate mortgages adjusting and putting people on their ear, I don't see that happening. People over leveraging their homes with HELOCs that are now adjusting and putting them out, I don't see that happening either.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
This has been fun, David. Thanks again. I look forward to you every year.
Excellent.
Well, I'm sensing you set the bar pretty low. So, and for what it's worth, if something does change this year, to Rhonda's point, I mean, if I do see a major change, I'm happy to come back. I mean, I don't have to talk to you for an hour, but I'm happy to come back and share if there's been any dramatic shifts. I'm particularly interested to see what the interest rate changes that we know are coming are going to have on the market. So if you want me to do a check-in later, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Do you really think interest rates are going to change? We're going into an election year. At least it's a midterm.
Well, yes and no. I believe that, the Fed's already announced that there are a few scheduled changes. How that's going to resonate, though, within the mortgage side of things, because there isn't a direct correlation necessarily with the Fed changing its policy and with what banks do vis-a-vis mortgage interest rates. But to not acknowledge it would, again, be naive.
Excellent. Well, we'd like to thank you for coming and presenting to us. This presentation will be available on our YouTube channel and sent out to the rest of the chamber so they can check it out after the fact and come back and review it. So if you want to come back and hear what David had said, if you want to have it repeated, this will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Always a pleasure and always wonderful to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
Y'all stay healthy. We'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.